I'm also the mom to two transgender kiddos. So this is my family's experience. Feel free to share your own stories in the chat or questions in the chat at any time. I am cisgender. I am a cisgender heterosexual. Cis just means that my gender assigned at birth is the same as my gender identity. So it syncs up. So I am cishet. What that means is that I have a certain perspective, and it is limited because I am not part of the LGBTQ plus community. So this is from the perspective of an ally. But having said that, I feel that it's super important that our job as allies is to broaden the group so that we can bring in and welcome new allies. We need every hand on deck to support LGBTQ plus youth, and this is a great way to start. So I just want to say I'm super happy and proud of all of you for being here and showing some interest in this topic because it's so important. So first of all, make yourself uncomfortable. I know that sounds a little odd at first, but basically what that means is these are difficult conversations. This is an hour. I will give you as much information as I can, but this is a lifelong learning process, and it's a lifelong unlearning process. We've spent a lot of time in our lives being conditioned to think of gender and gender issues in a particular way. We all do that. But over time, we realize, you know what, maybe we should shift our perspective. Maybe we should learn from others how to grow. What does that look like? That looks uncomfortable sometimes. And if you feel that feeling, I would just encourage you just to sit with it for a little bit, think about it, reflect on it. That feeling is a touch point for you, and it shows that that is a growth moment for you. So that's a good thing. It feels kind of uncomfortable, but it's a good thing, I promise. Okay, so we're going to move on to start with pronouns. So first of all, I want to welcome everyone. Hey, friends. Hey, folks. How are my peeps doing over there? Let's start with, how do you address a group of people you don't know? I can't even see you, so I don't know. I don't know anyone's gender. That's cool. I'm going to say, hey, friends, or hey, folks. There's many fun ways to do this. When I talk to a group of kids, I like to really make it silly and fun. So I'll say, hey, oh, look at you, morning glories. How are you doing, lovelies? It's so nice to see you, movers and shakers. How about you, snickerdoodles? All of that. It's just really fun. But with adults, of course, you can just fall back on friends, folks, people. Those are all totally fine. And when you're talking to an individual, it's also important to look for gender neutral terms when you're talking to an individual. So I have trained myself not to use sir or ma'am or ladies or gentlemen. It's hard, and it is an unlearning process, like I said, but it's just so important, because here's the thing about pronouns. If we are using pronouns that make people feel good about themselves, the pronouns that are what they have chosen as being applicable to their own identity, that is an act of love, and it is suicide prevention. And I'm going to say that again. If we use people's pronouns and if we support them visibly, intentionally, explicitly, loudly, that is suicide prevention. We all know that transgender kiddos have a high risk of suicide. They live in a world that is not welcoming. They live in a world that is not accepting. They live in a world that is a barrier to them. And so when they hear someone use a pronoun, it's a lifeline for them. It really is. Okay, so gender unicorn. This explains all the different aspects of what we're going to be talking about today. I'll try to break it down for you. Again, any questions, put them in the chat and we'll address them as we go. So the gender unicorn is all the pieces of a person that makes them who they are. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two separate things. They are not the same. When I was growing up, I'm a Gen Xer. When I was growing up, we did not have that distinction. We talked about sexual orientation. We talked about people being gay, but it was always in the context of a relationship or their sexuality. That is just not the case. I mean, that's part of someone's identity, but like everyone, that's only one part of our identity. Well, let's talk about the whole person. Let's take a more holistic, supportive view. So gender identity is what that is. Gender identity is how you feel internally. I think it's sort of like being in love, okay? When you walk down the street, no one can tell if you're in love. It doesn't show on the outside. Well, sometimes you'll smile and stuff, but it doesn't show a whole lot on the outside, right? But you know it, and it makes you feel a particular way, and it's very real. And you know that that feeling is something that you want to keep forever, right? That's the same thing with gender identity. It's like a self-love, okay? Think of it that way. And when someone has that self-love and it's very clear and they share that with you, it is a gift. And it is a beautiful gift that they are opening up to you about their internal self. So that's what gender identity is. And it can be the whole spectrum. There's a long spectrum of girl, woman, man, boy, non-binary, androgynous. All of these things are just part of the whole spectrum. Believe it or not, there's currently 58 named genders right now, and it's growing. So it's pretty amazing. Gender expression is how people present themselves externally. It may or may not match their gender identity. It's just their external presentation of what they want the world to see at that point. So people who are closeted, for example, have a gender expression that often matches their sex assigned at birth, right? Because they're wanting to protect themselves in that way with their gender expression. Other people, when they start to realize their gender identity might not match their gender assigned at birth, they start to express themselves externally with clothing or a name change or pronoun use. All of those things are called social transitioning. And that is how someone, when they're coming out as transgender, often will first let people know, is through their gender expression. Now, here's the other thing about gender expression. It changes, just like it changes with everybody. So I told you I'm the mom of 2 transgender kiddos, and I noticed my teens sometimes would be like, oh, I'm feeling feminine today, and then would dress super feminine. And then the next day they'd be like, oh, I'm feeling masculine today, and would dress super masculine. So it can fluctuate and it can change. And I think that's a really healthy way for teens in particular to explore and figure it out. Sex assigned at birth. So that is the biological part. And here's how we currently do it. Someone has a baby, a human baby, and the grown-ups in the room look at the baby and they identify a sex assigned at birth based purely on external factors. They look at the baby and they see external reproductive genitalia, right? And that is how they assign the sex, even for intersex babies. Intersex babies are babies that have different sexual characteristics of male and female or a mixture of them. Even in that situation, currently, doctors will still assign either a boy or a girl gender status to that baby. So think about that for a minute. I'm going to ask you to do a little thought exercise. So we are sorting babies into their gender assignment the day they're born. And that sorting process then colors how they are going to be perceived in the world and how they're going to behave in the world, the kinds of opportunities that we will give to them, the kinds of language that we use with them. It colors everything, right? So imagine if instead of looking at someone's reproductive organs and assigning a gender, let's look at something else that sorts people. What about your belly button? There are innies and there are outies, right? What if we lived in a world where when a baby is born, the innies wear this color, the outies wear that color, the innies play with these toys, the outies play with these toys. You get what I'm going with this. It's when you think of it that way, you think, wow, that's not nearly complex enough to explain the human condition of gender, right? So that's why sex assigned at birth can be really highly problematic. And the other piece of it is even in the very scientific way of identifying sex, it is a combination of your physical organs, your hormones, your chromosomes, right? It's all those things. And we do not test those things. We don't test babies for their chromosomes or their hormone levels, or their internal organs. Are they matching their external ones? And we know in nature, in animals and in humans, there are many, many different varieties of that. And it's, it's a lot. It's a very complex thing. There's a chemistry teacher that I've been following online, and he said that he does not have students look up their own chromosomes because they might find out in a classroom that their chromosomes don't match their assigned sex at birth. And he wants to be very respectful of the fact that if that were to happen in a classroom environment, it could be traumatic for that kid. So that's sex assigned at birth. Then we come to sexual orientation. And sexual orientation can be a physical attraction to someone of the same gender or opposite or different gender or all genders, or emotionally attracted to somebody. There are people who are asexual, so it's not a sexual orientation, it's an emotional attraction to others. So those are asexual people. And there are people who are attracted to all sexualities, and they are called pansexual. So there's a whole beautiful range of variety. So I'm going to pause here for just a minute and check to see if anyone would like to add a question in the chat, because I just threw a lot of information at you. Nope. Okay, moving on. So we talked about the different 58 different genders, sometimes 72. I don't know if anyone really knows. I'm a librarian. I did some research and I saw both of those. So that's why I said it's somewhere between 58 and 72 different identities. I will share this presentation with you later if you would like to take a look at some of these identities. But you can see, like if you go down this A to Z list, there are so many. Androgynous, agender, intersex, genderqueer, all of these. And it just keeps going and going. And this is a wonderful list. And it tells you all the different terms. And here's the thing, you don't have to understand it. You don't have to know all of it. We just have to respect it. Especially if someone comes out to you personally, I like to say, you know what? Understanding comes later. Support and love come first, and understanding comes later after you do some research and figure out what's going on with that person, okay? So children naturally play with gender. That's why I call it gender expansive kids or gender creative kids. Most children have some sort of gender nonconforming behavior when they play. They like to try on different genders. That's totally healthy. It's not until later that they start sorting themselves into, the binary of boys and girls. But by age 3, they're pretty clear about their own gender identity, and they're starting to realize externally how other people see them and perceive them, and what other people think they are. Okay, so that happens at a very young age, at age 3. That's why it's so important that we talk to kids about gender from the very beginning. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to do that. But here's a really interesting example. I work with kids, and there's a lot of dinosaur kids out there. And this is the longest dinosaur name I could find. I'm going to tell you how to say it: Micropachycephalosaurus. I can't hear you, so feel free to practice it out loud. Micropachycephalosaurus. And my perspective is, if a 4-year-old can pronounce Micropachycephalosaurus, then we can manage to pronounce LGBTQ+, we can figure out these pronouns, we can figure out all these genders. I don't know all the names of dinosaurs, but I know there's a lot of them. I don't know all the names of genders, but I know there's a lot of them. And it's something that I respect, and it's something that I value. All right. So the other piece of this is the LGBTQ alphabet mafia, as it's called sometimes, because it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's because it's a huge umbrella, and it's so inclusive that nobody wants to leave anyone out, which I think is just really lovely. So I think we know that L is lesbian, G is gay, B bisexual, T transgender, Q is for queer or questioning, I is for intersex, A is for asexual, 2S plus is for two-spirit, 2S is for two-spirit, which is the indigenous language for a transgender person. And the plus is just, again, we don't want to leave anyone out. There's many, many more. Now let's talk for a second about some of the ways language is changing. In particular, let's talk about the Q word, which is the word queer. I like to reference people from the LGBTQ community as much as I can, because like I said, I'm not part of that community, I'm an ally, but this is a really good article where people explain how they feel about the word. But essentially, the word queer is being reclaimed. When I was a kid, it was a slur, and I never said it. I was taught never, ever, ever to say it. So when my oldest kiddo came out and said, "Hey, Mom, I'm gender queer," it took me a long time to be able to even say it verbally. Not because I was embarrassed about them coming out, but because the word felt like such a bad word, right? And so reclaiming that word is messy. And for some people in the community, it's fully reclaimed, and for others, it's not. So I would caution you against using it in a context where you're not sure or you don't know. However, if you have friends or family or loved ones in the community and they're using the word, then you can use it too to support them. So I would say like something about the queer community is a good example. The nice thing about the word queer is that it is, it's inclusive, it's a nice umbrella term, but it also has an advocacy portion to it. So I'm going to show you what that is. It's a complex thing that these writers have really dug into and explained in a beautiful way. Okay, so listen to this. I know how empowering it feels to reclaim words that have been used to harm us. And I appreciate queer specifically because it has always carried a sense of undefined abstractness. Even as a slur, the word described those who exist outside of what society mandates, so it's fitting that the term now defies all restrictions of love and self that the world has placed on it. So I couldn't say it better than that. So that's a really good way to define it. Another new thing that's happening is that the pronouns it and its is also being reclaimed by young Gen Z LGBTQ youth. And the reason that they're reclaiming it, its is very similar to the reason they're reclaiming queer, because those were terms that were used to hurt them in the past. So they're trying to reclaim it and own it and redefine it in a way that is healthy for the community. So let's practice pronouns. First and foremost, from the get-go, you're gonna make mistakes. I made so many mistakes at first, trust me. I did all these things, and that's why I'm talking to you today, so that hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. You will make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. However, when you do slip up, correct yourself really briefly and move on. Don't make a big deal about it. Don't do what I did. What I did was, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh, please forgive me. I really do support you. I really love you. I just really screwed up. I'm really sorry. Because when you do that, you're putting the emotion and the emotional labor back on the other person. You're making them feel bad. You're making them feel bad just for having a pronoun. And they should not feel bad for that, okay? Also, don't use the word preferred pronoun. I mean, it's still being used somewhat, but a better term is just pronouns, because preferred kind of indicates that, oh, you know, it's a fly-by-night kind of thing, because it's not. It's their pronouns. So it's just firmly, this is our pronoun use. If you make a mistake, say, I'm sorry, correct yourself, and move on. Say thank you if someone corrects you. That's a beautiful way to just pump up the support. Get in the habit of correcting others. I just hired a non-binary staff person who uses they, them pronouns, and I find myself correcting my colleagues. Is it easy? No, it's not. Is being an ally easy? No, it's not, but it's important and it's our job, and so I do it. And the more you do it, the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. So a colleague will slip up and I'll say, oh, actually so-and-so is they, them. I'll just say it very neutrally and move on. And again, most people are like, oh, thank you, right? Do it 3 times to get it right. So if you slip up once, then either in your head or out loud, depending on the situation, practice. Say, okay, so-and-so, I slipped up with the pronoun. I'm going to use their correct pronoun now. So I'll say, they have a really interesting jacket on today, and their smile is super beautiful, and I'm really proud of them for pointing out that I messed up a pronoun, right? So those 3 sentences in my brain or being said out loud helps me practice and makes it easier. At this point, I've been in this journey for like 5 years now, so I'm much, much better at it, but trust me, I was not at the beginning. Practice with other people. You know, this is a good place to practice. Practice with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family. Don't make people feel like a burden. Don't say, oh, I can't remember that. That's too hard. Really? Okay, if someone says, hi, my name is Catherine, but I like to go by Cat, we just do it, right? It's not hard. Like, oh, hey, Cat. We don't go back to Catherine because it's too hard to say Cat. So it's really important to really think hard about that, like why we give pushback to people. Now we can talk about the they, them in terms of singular and plural. Now I will say I am an English major and a librarian, so yes, did I struggle with they, them pronouns? Yes, I did. Mainly for the plural singular thing, because it's confusing and it caused my brain to have to think about things a little more hardly, a little more strongly. And older brains are a little bit slower, maybe. I know mine is. I know it takes me a little longer to learn things than when I was young. I'm 53. So I gave myself grace. I gave myself time. I gave myself practice. And you'll get there. You will. And again, you make a mistake, you move on. It's okay. Family and community support is critical. I said this at the beginning, and I do want to repeat it. That gender affirming behavior on the part of adults greatly improves mental health and well-being. We know this. We know that transgender kids are high risk. We know that they're at risk of suicide and bullying and rejection and job loss and homelessness and violence and all of it. How can we help them? How can we fix this? Well, I think we can start with our kids. I think we can start with educating a new generation that that's not okay and that it is okay to be who you are. So that's been my goal in being an advocate. So let's talk about how we do that. Let's foster gender equality from birth. So take a look at this graphic. It explains what girls are and what boys are. What are the qualities of girls? I am old enough to remember the whole girls are sweet and boys are puppy dog tails stuff, which is, as we know now, pretty ridiculous. But at the time, that's what we were taught, right? So we have to unlearn that, and we have to learn something new. So when we think about young children, babies, toddlers, preschoolers, focus on their behaviors and their qualities and their characters, not on their physical characteristics. So, for example, I train my staff at the library that a young child comes up to you, you want to talk to them, they're cute, they're 3, right? Over and over again, I see this with grown-ups where a little girl will come up and will say, oh, look at you. Oh, your outfit is so cute. Oh, I love your boots. We focus on what she's wearing, or we'll focus on how cute she is. So it's a little boy will say, hey, buddy, it's great to see you. Oh, my goodness. Are you feeling all excited today? Are you feeling like are you going to go play soccer later? You know, we go straight to sports. We go straight to like buddy talk, stuff like that. It is a way, we don't even think about it. It's our natural way of socializing children. So I encourage my staff to try a different path. And that different path is to focus on their behavior. So I'll say something like, oh, hi, it's so great to see you here at the library. I bet you're curious, aren't you? You're curious to learn something new? Or I bet you're a reader. You like to hear some stories? You know, things like that. Just point out that kind of behavior for both boys and girls. You could say to a little girl, wow, look at you, you're so tough. And you could say to a little boy, oh, that was so sweet of you. That was so kind. You are such a kind person. You see what I'm doing? I'm flipping the switch, flipping the script. So be gender expansive about choices when it comes to playtime, clothes, toys, decorations, entertainment. The more you see it, the more you realize that our society is heavily gendered. It was, you go into a toy store and there's the pink aisle and there's the blue aisle, right? That's a problem. That's a problem for all children because it sorts them into teams, right? Really, what we want is for everyone to get along and be friends with each other. So this fostering gender inclusive friendships and playgroups is essential. It's essential as children grow, because the more comfortable they feel with all genders, the more it doesn't matter, right? Children experience gender at very young ages. So we need to contextualize it as grown-ups to help them understand it. Playtime's a great time to do that. So an example would be, let's say you're playing dollhouse with your kid in your life. And the kid says, okay, you be the mommy, I'll be the daddy. That's a common thing to do. You could play that way. And then the next time you'd be like, hey, let's play again. And this time, let's both be mommies. Right? Why not? See what happens. Let them play with it. Those are examples of being intentional about helping children understand the gender diversity that is in our world. Here are some wonderful books to share with children. I'm not going to go over all of them with you, but because I don't have time today. But again, I'm going to send this to Stephanie, and if you want a copy of it, we can easily get you a copy of these books. These are books about gender expansive children, and publishing is exploding right now with these titles. There are so many positive, affirming, beautiful portrayals of gender expansive kids. And that's what these books are for. And they help start the conversation, and they are for all kids. All kids need to understand the world that we live in, and all kids need to be inclusive with their friendships, and all kids need to respect the variety of genders that exist, right? So helping kids be gender inclusive. This is for a little bit older. As kids get older, there's more pressures. There's more pressures for them to fit into the gender roles and gender boxes that we're assigning them as adults. That makes it a little trickier, and that means we just have to step up our work. Teach kids to be upstanders. If they see someone being left out for any reason, you can't play, you're a girl. You can't play, you're a boy. Talk about it. Talk about it, read books, movies. Anytime you see gender exclusionary behavior or discriminatory behavior, unkind behavior, point it out every single time and talk about it. Foster gender inclusive friendships. Again, invite someone new over and see what happens, and be gender affirming if they start to demonstrate gender creative play, gender creative dress. Again, we want to support them in that exploration. So here's some elementary reads. This is for kindergarten through 5th grade. Again, so many beautiful books on here. I wanted to point out a couple things. I think a lot of you have probably heard about The Lightning Thief, right? Rick Riordan is leading the charge for children's authors in promoting gender inclusive literature for kids. And he was the first author ever to include a non-binary character in his books. So that's super important, and it's happening. This book being Jazz, written by Jazz Jennings, that was the first, I believe the first teen trans girl to write a memoir about her experiences of being a trans girl. Incredibly brave, incredibly moving book. It's a few years old now, but it's still really worth a read, and all these others, of course. So let's talk about teenagers. So again, it gets complicated. We all know this. I'm a parent, but even if you're not a parent, we all know that teens are complicated. The most important thing for teens is to be open and receptive, not judgmental, and again, to be visible in your support. Teenagers and Gen Z look at older people and they think we disapprove of them. If we're being quiet and not saying anything, they read that as disapproval. They read that as judgment. The older we get, the more kids think that. So we need to say, hey, no, actually, I do support you. I am here. Let's talk about it. We need to be visible. Identify your own family biases and change them. Every time I run across some sort of internal bias, A, I feel uncomfortable. B, I get that flush of shame. I feel it. It's there. I feel embarrassed. I want to run away. I don't want to talk about it. But then when I like, okay, I reflect on it. Why do I feel uncomfortable? I feel uncomfortable because it's a bias, and that bias is hurtful and it is harming people. I need to stop. How do I stop it? I need to rethink it. I need to choose another path. So it's a hard process, but it's an important one. Model your own journey, talk to other people. That's what I'm doing today. I hope you can do that too later with a friend. I would challenge all of you to talk to just one person, just one. Start the conversation and something like this. Hi, yeah, I've been wanting to talk about this with somebody. I think maybe you'd be a good person to talk about. Would you like to talk about gender issues with me? See what happens, have the conversation. Also encourage dating partners of different genders and different orientations. I had a kid come in a few days ago to the library, 7th grader. I read this person as being female, but I didn't know for sure. So I asked the question, what are your pronouns? She told me that they were she, her, but cisgender kids like to be asked what their pronouns are too, by the way. Everybody does. You have Gen Z. It's not a rude question. It's a very valid, very affirming question for them. So she said she, her, and I said, okay, what do you want today? And she said, I'd like some romance books. So I grabbed some romance books. I grabbed heterosexual romance books like that. Why? A, there's a lot of them. B, I knew what they were. C, I felt comfortable with them. D, I assumed that's what she wanted. Was I missing something? Maybe. Maybe I was. So then I also went and grabbed 2 other books that were about lesbian romance because I don't know. I don't know for sure. And I wanted to give this kid choices and I wanted to be affirming. So then I grabbed all these books and I brought them over and I put them on a table. I said, just take whichever ones you want. And I walked away because that's what you do with teens. They don't need me hovering over them. But that's an example of integrating this gender inclusivity into daily practice, into your work, into your home. Another example is when I went to my library, I asked to change my pronouns. I'm cishet. I put she, her on my email signature and on my business cards. They hadn't had someone do that on their business cards before. Why do I do that? Because it protects transgender kids. Because if all of us do the pronoun thing, then they're not standing out. They're not being targeted for their pronouns, right? If it's just normalized, that's the main reason to do that. Here's some reads for teens in middle school. Here's what I want to ask you for this next thought exercise. I want you to close your eyes and think about your very first experience of gender. How did you know that what your gender assignment was? How did you know that you were assigned as a boy or a girl? How old were you? What were you doing? How did that feel? Did it feel confusing, safe, not safe? How did it feel? Think about it. If you want to share in the chat, feel free to do that. You don't have to. But mine is, I knew I was a girl at about age 4 when I had 2 older brothers and I was following them around like a puppy dog, and I was told I couldn't do that anymore because I was a girl. No, the activities that they were doing. I couldn't run around with my shirt off anymore, right? So I think a lot of times children experience gender assignments in a negative way. And it's important for us to acknowledge that and maybe try to change that. So for teenagers, we also want to teach our teens to stand up and be upstanders. And we need to do that by modeling it ourselves. So every time I go and I say something or I do a presentation, I let my kids know. I let them know that I did it because I'm modeling to them that this is just part of the work of being an ally. So here's some things you can say. Help me understand. I don't understand that. That's not okay. What you just said is harmful. I'm not comfortable with that. That's not funny. Those are all disruptive statements that we can say in uncomfortable situations if someone is saying something discriminatory, prejudiced, that kind of thing. Another way to be a good ally is to advocate for LGBTQIA+ youth as a whole, support all gender restrooms. It's important. It's a basic human need to go to the restroom. You shouldn't have to feel like you're going to be unsafe using a restroom that is your gender identity. Educate, empower your friends and family, make communities safe, support transgender athletes. They are being targeted right now in a very harmful, unfair way. Amplify LGBTQ+ voices with art, businesses, music, celebrities. Support their work. Support them, honor them, celebrate them. Be loud, be proud about our history of LGBTQ+ Americans and how they have been an essential part of our communities from the very beginning. Okay. So here's some books for adult allies. Again, I'm not going to go over all of these, but there's a mixture of nonfiction and fiction. I would say This Is How It Always Is was a really wonderful read. That's a good book group book because it's a fictional account of raising a gender creative child. But all of these are just really good choices. Trans Like Me is a memoir. It's one of my favorites. It really helps me understand from the inside what a non-binary person experiences. Because when my kid came out as non-binary, I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand it. Again, understanding comes later. Support and love come first. Now I understand it, but I didn't for a while until I did some research. Representation matters. It matters a whole lot. Again, we need every hand on deck for this really, really important work. It is suicide prevention. It is preventing depression, and it is making our communities stronger and healthier. These are some facts about transgender athletes and inclusive schools. One of the other things you can do is go to your school board and ask them, what's your policy on transgender athletes? Dig into that. Change it one school at a time. It is absolutely false that trans athletes have an unfair advantage in sports. It is absolutely false. And this lie has hurt a lot of people. And we're talking about 15 and 16-year-olds. Why can't they play sports? It's just a horrific thing that's happening, and we need to be paying attention to that. Finally, here's a list of resources to support the LGBTQ community. There's lots of different ones. The Human Rights Campaign is a good place to start if you want information about what all of this means. They have so much stuff. So if you're only going to go on one of these, I would choose that one. But there are many, many others. I would encourage you to read books, go to your library, talk to your friends, and just learn as much as you can. Thank you so much for your time and your support of this topic. And now is a great time for questions.
And again, if you guys have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A and I can ask them for you anonymously, or you can put them in the chat. So insightful. Thank you, says Connie. You're welcome. I'm so glad that all of you came out tonight. And also, I really appreciate, that we kind of switched things on you last minute. So I appreciate you guys, going through that with us. But also, it was pretty cold. So I'm glad we all didn't have to leave our houses tonight, which was a plus side to this being online.
100%. Do you have any questions, Stephanie?
I do not. I think this was great and really insightful. And I agree with what people are saying. I think, as all of this new information is coming out, it's great just to learn about it. And it's okay that we don't have all the answers and things are changing all the time. So it's just really great to know where to go to stay up to date with this stuff. And again, Heather, I thought you did such a good job of explaining this in a way that really hits home and makes a lot of sense.
All right, thank you. Well, it has been such a pleasure talking with all of you today. And feel free to send me an email, follow up. Stephanie, I'll give you the presentation. You can give anyone my email. That's cool if they have questions later or would like further resources. I'm here for you.
That's great.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we have one last question. This was something that was brought up earlier in the chat. How are we empowering the queer community to get the necessary medical care they need?
Yeah. That's super important. I mean, one thing is they need to feel safe, right? And supported. A lot of times it's on an individual level, offer to go to an appointment with somebody. Offer to do the research for them too. I did that with my own kiddos. Things come up as they get older. They're both adults now, and they're not sure how to navigate that. They're adulting. Adulting's hard. So I do my part in I'll research trans-affirming healthcare in your area, right? And that is a huge help to people because it's so overwhelming. So even just that one task can be such an act of love for them. The other thing, of course, is to fight for equal health care on a political level is important as well, or within our communities to just make it more acceptable and visible.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great night. And again, you can reach out to me. You all have my email if you want to get in touch with Heather, and she's going to send me the presentation again. So let me know if you guys would like access to that. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.